We're both doing it now, Pat.
We did this. We could almost. Can we hold hands if we did that? High five. High fives.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
That's too weird. Hey team, kia ora whanau.
That is top shelf.
Top shelf.
Top shelf broadcasting.
Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. So good to be with you all. Isn't it weird how trying to work this out with the camera? It's like which is the right hand that way and that way. How are you all? Hope you're all well. Hope everyone's rocking and rolling. Good to see you all again tonight. Good to have you back. Did you bring a friend? You know, that's our plan. We want you to evangelize people. Have them join our cult, the cult of BHN. And bring a friend along.
System.
And we will love bomb them and bring them into our cult. Very good to be with you all. Hope you're looking forward to an interesting night. We've got a really informative and interesting interview tonight with Professor Lisa Marriott. It's already been recorded, but they wrote a piece, her and Max Rashbrook wrote a piece. Actually, they've done a whole year's research on this, Chewy, about money and politics. And they've written a piece that came out on the conversation today. And I'm talking to Lisa about that. There is a link already in the description of this show for that article if you want to watch it after the show. Don't go and read it now. Watch first, then go read the whole thing. And interesting conversation that we had. That'll be coming up. Also, a bit later on tonight, we want to have a look at just the utter lies. Like, good news today, yeah? Like, good news, inflation's come down. Like, a good news story. No one's saying inflation's perfect, but a good news story. So, of course, National has to figure out how are we going to spin this to follow our narrative that Labor doesn't know what they're doing. Well, what we'll do, there are some things from today. We're going to play a little comment later on today on from Close Up. Is that what it's called? 7 Sharp? I don't know. Holmes? Is it still called Holmes? One of those shows. And they have an economist on, and she's not particularly stoked. She's like, it's a good news, but there's lots of bad things. National could have come out using all of those points, but they didn't choose to do that. They just came out and told a bold-faced lie about it. Just
that's much easier.
Lie. Like, honestly, it's like, this is the thing that frustrates me the most about any kind of political party. When there are actual facts you can put out there that would sell on some level the same narrative you want, but you choose none of those and you just lie. It's so bizarre. And as is usual, there's been no pushback from the mainstream media. So we will have to come through and show you all of their failings and show you what the truth is. Sorry, my phone's just buzzing in my pocket and it's causing my testicles to itch. So I'll just get rid of it. So we'll show you that a bit later on tonight. And we might get some other news around what is a woman. Probably won't because we're running out of time, but we might get around to that. Let me say before we kickstart that you have got about 24 hours left to be a part of speaking of the Big Hairy Cult, as someone just said in the text, you have got 24 hours to get into this month's drops. And remember, if you buy a shirt or a hoodie during the show, there's a small caveat there, and I see it. I typically do. Then we'll also play you a little song to say thanks for joining on board the Big Hairy Cult. And, that's actually, I'm thinking the t-shirt straight away, Big Hairy Cult. Okay. And of course we have 2 t-shirts or 2 pieces of clothing with the slogans, if the left vote, the left wins. And of course, Christopher Luxon, not a businessman, just a board member. So we will be wrapping that up tomorrow night at midnight. That'll be the last time you'll get a chance to buy that exact variants of those tops. So get in the next 26 hours, 27 hours, if you want to be a part of the very first drop ever. There'll be a new drop next month and then we'll have some BHN tops. And I thought what we'd do, because we've been talking about how do you make them exclusive, and all of you guys have been saying, well, let's just do BHN tops and we'll get those. What I'm going to do is, rather than OG, which of course is that an acronym, OG? Anyway, for Original Gangster, we're going to have OB on the back of any that are sold before the election. I've decided of BHN tops are going to have OB on the back, which is for an original beardy. So therefore, like, if we're still around in 3 years' time doing this and we're bigger than Hosking, then those of you who get the BHN gear before the election 2023 will have OB gear, original beardies. So you'll be cooler than everybody else. Anyway, Chewy, I've got a little something to share with you, which I think you'll enjoy, and I think everyone else will enjoy as well. Joe Biden, who by and by is a bit of a disappointment and a bit of a failure when it comes to lots of things in America, he has made one of the greatest political videos the world has ever seen.
Go on then.
It's true. Marjorie Taylor, who's already responded to this. This is a bit of Marjorie Taylor's speech about Joe Biden. I'm not going to play it for you, but have a bit of a listen. If it decides to play.
Joe Biden is attempting to complete socialism. Meanwhile,
complete socialism. Like, finish it.
$2 trillion in debt, with record high homelessness, 40-year record inflation.
What Joe Biden's team has done has taken her words and made this advert. Oh, I'm going to put the sound on this time to make sure you hear it. So this is Joe Biden's team.
Joe Biden had the largest public investment in social infrastructure and environmental programs that is actually finishing what FDR started, that LBJ expanded on, and Joe Biden is attempting to complete programs to address education, medical care, urban problems, rural poverty, transportation, Medicare, Medicaid, labor unions, and he still is working on it.
Honestly, one of the greatest political ads there's ever been. One of the greatest political ads there's ever been. And then, of course, she got her knickers in a twist and she put this out there as saying, come on, Joe, at least say what was actually said. And I won't play it for you, but I'll play you like the last 30 seconds because this is her video to say, you're wrong, Joe. What I said was so much more important. Let me play you about the last 20 seconds of what she said.
100 Americans every single day that Joe Biden doesn't give a damn about. I urge you with this, pay attention to war. Pay attention to war. There's 2 wars, on our children and a future coming world war. And we do not want any part of it. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God.
That was supposed to be put up as a defense of her and what she actually said. Didn't make it look much better. But anyway, I wanted to share that. It's like the greatest ever political video I've ever seen. Just completely just using her voice, what she said. Obviously, they edited it together. But yes, as endorsed, Joe Biden as endorsed by Marjorie Taylor Greene. Fantastic, Chewy.
In the coming war against children, I think we'll win because children are very bad at operating machinery.
And they're little.
They're very small.
Yeah, little people.
Yeah, they don't have the endurance.
Yeah.
So I think we'll win that one. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're good. You got your dog with you tonight?
She is sulking.
Come here.
She is sulking.
Come.
It's your turn, Pat. You can have your dog.
Come.
Elva.
Up.
Elva. Don't embarrass me.
Up. Oh, come on.
Elva.
Oh.
There you are.
Oh.
Good.
Oh. You're not looking at the camera, mate. Over here. Oh, not very happy.
Can you do this?
Oh,
Can you do this with your one?
My dog's a bit too big. No, my dog's a bit too big for that.
You can rub her the tummy.
Yeah. It's over there. There we go. What's going on? I think we might talk about dogs in the workplace. Oh, what's going on? My dog's freaking out because my dog's not allowed on laps. That's why she's freaking out. She wants to get down more than anything in the world. Okay, wait. Let me get my microphone out of the way. All right, then you get... Oh.
Back in the producer's chair.
Oh my goodness. Now I'm covered in dog hair. All right. Hi, people. We want to talk about the stupidest story of today that should not be a news headline. We're talking about it because we are having dogs in our workplace. But there's a really big issue in politics at the moment. Like, inflation's down, unemployment's looking okay, various Labour Party ministers are falling over. But the biggest news story of the day is Tory Whanau taking her dog to work. Let's have a bit of a listen.
Wellington's Mayor, Tory Whanau, is under fire for having her dog in the office.
The problem is the City Council's leased building reportedly doesn't allow animals. But as Leighton Hakel found out, dogs are becoming increasingly normal at work.
Yeah.
New Zealand's Parliament, the centre of our democracy, where not only politicians roam the halls of power, but their dogs do too.
There's no shortage of dogs here in Parliament. It makes for a cool atmosphere.
Zoe is Minister Kieran McAnulty's 3-year-old rescue greyhound. Both her mum and dad work at Parliament, so she's here most days.
Our respective officers fight over who gets her for the day.
Because, he says, Zoe makes everything that bit better.
Just having a dog in the office, not even doing anything, just puts people in a good mood.
But the same can't quite be said at Wellington City Council. Mayor Tory Whanau is copping a bit of flack over her dog Teddy spending time at the office.
That is beautiful.
Problem is, the building is reportedly not allowed animals, but the mayor's office told staff the landlord hadn't asked her to stop bringing him.
The mayor told staff that people can get stuffed. I think that's probably the official word. I think probably.
Yeah, I kind of treat him like a prince, that one.
We asked the council whether it would ask the landlord to change its policy so everyone could bring in their dogs. A spokesperson declined to comment, but staff at Flick Electric would 100% recommend it.
This is the first place I've worked at with dogs, and it's so cool because it just livens the environment and it makes it feel a little bit less like the daily grind.
It helps keep things that positive and uplifting vibe that we really want to cultivate here at Flick.
It's rare to have a day here without a dog in the office, and while it won't work for every workplace, staff here say having pups like Peach make the tougher moments easier.
It's a good de-stressor, especially for me if I just need to go out and get some air. I'll just go take Peach for a walk.
And in stressful environments like Parliament, perhaps that's why pooches are so popular. Leighton Hakel, News Hub.
So this was actually a front page story. I saw it first on Stuff. A front page story, like if it was a newspaper, it would have been on the front page of the newspaper, that a person brings a dog to work that everyone seems to love. Other people use the dog to take breaks, which is always going to be good, and somebody's not happy about it. So, and there's already word out there from some sectors about Tory Whanau getting undue criticism based on some of her alleged exploits in the past. And it does seem a little bit like there's a bit of an attack campaign against her. So a couple of things here, Chewy. Yeah. One is the situation with Tory Whanau. Two is there is a ton of research out there saying pets and stuff in the workplace, unless they bark when you're trying to talk, that's really rude, but just make things so much better on so many levels, including areas of stress and stuff.
Yeah, it definitely does seem like she's being targeted. Like that ridiculous beat up about her having some drinks at a restaurant and running off without paying and all of this sort of stuff. And then this, so the story is she brings the dog to work. Nobody seems to have any complaints about that. But somebody's gone, well, the landlord doesn't allow dogs in the building. What does the landlord have to say? Apparently nothing.
Yeah.
So where's the story?
Yeah, exactly.
The fact that they had to pad out the story into, there's benefits with having dogs in the office, just shows how thin it was. I'm surprised so many stories have been written about this. Like, if I was a serious political editor and someone put that across my desk, I'd be like, fuck off. What, no, what's this bullshit?
I just think as well, and I've had dogs for good portions of my life. I've had 3 dogs, so that's probably getting close to 40 years worth of dogs, maybe 35 to 40 years worth of dogs, including when I was a child. And it sounds really weird to say, I don't know if I could work for a place now that I couldn't take my dog. Like if I got a job working for a place and I couldn't take my dog, it would be one of the considerations of not working for that place. Yes, I said dog. I said dog 3 times. That's why you're looking at me. Dog. I can see you. Because everything's better with a dog. Everything. It's like everything's better when you add cream to it. It's like, if you're eating it, that is. Everything's better with a dog. Everything.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to work in a job or an office where that was an option. Fortunately, I don't.
Yeah.
Sucks.
Have you ever had that conversation?
About bringing a dog into a retail environment?
Yeah.
No. Because I know that that's a bad idea.
I guess office spaces are more likely than a place where 100 people come through the door every day. But yeah,
absolutely. But yeah, I mean,
it does feel like a beat up against Tory Whanau, though. I mean, how many people around New Zealand have dogs in the workplace, and she gets a headline based around somebody wanting to get clout off a story? I don't know. Maybe if there are councillors who also lost the mayoralty election, they're always looking for a way to kind of get in underneath her. They've gone through the regular, oh, look, no pets allowed in this building, we'll get her. I'm just like, get it life. But as you say, Chewy, if the landlord knows and the landlord doesn't have a problem with it, there's no story.
Yeah, that's it. That's the end of it.
Yeah.
Moving on.
All right.
She's obviously pissing off the right people. So
yeah, that's probably true. The curmudgeons of the world. All right, hey, let's get into this next story. We've got a pre-recorded interview for you now, but before we do, Chewy, I'll show you exactly what the story is about. There was an article written by both friends of the show, Max Rashbrook and Lisa Marriott. It's actually based on about 12 months worth of research, where they were looking at donation limits and funding fixes and how they could make a New Zealand election fairer for all. Quite shocking, actually. I won't go too much into it now because we talk about it, but we talk about, America wants to get money out of politics. What does that actually mean? Because there's a shit ton of money in New Zealand politics. Like, there's a huge amount of money in New Zealand politics. But we are supposedly we in Australia and the UK are looked at from people from within America who want to get rid of out of politics. Like, do it like they're doing it, but it's not quite as black and white as that. Do you want to speak to it all before we get into the interview, or do you want to hold your thoughts until after the interview and we can pick up on it?
Oh no, I just want to say, look, money in politics is something that I very much worry about. I've seen arguments for making elections publicly funded and that sort of thing. I think if you're a party that's getting $500,000 donations and stuff like that, nobody gives you that much money and doesn't expect something in return. I think it puts ministers in a position of compromise. They might say that they don't consider it. I'm sure I can't see why you wouldn't consider that a donor wants something for his money back. So I'd much rather if that just wasn't an option.
Well, this is exactly the research that they've looked into. They spoke to a bunch of high donors, and that's where they've got their research from. And this is the conversation that's come from it. Enjoy it. We'll see you in about 15, 20 minutes. And then we're going to go into our conversation around them lying National Party members and why they won't just play a straight bat. Chewy, you know that. Sporting analogy. You understand that, eh? Sure.
Sports ball.
Here we go. Lisa Marriott, Professor Lisa Marriott, and me from earlier this evening. We welcome to the show from Victoria University of Wellington, Professor of Taxation, Lisa Marriott. Lisa, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate your time.
Delighted to be here.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time leading up to this election. I think 88 or 87 days to go, and everyone's all thinking about what's happening and what's coming up, and people are releasing policies, and academics are talking about fairer and better elections. And you've just done an article with Max Rashbrook, headed "Tougher Donation Limits and Funding Fixes Would Make Future New Zealand Elections Fairer for All." There are some things in the article I really like to speak to, but to start off with, maybe as we always kind of do, I'll kind of just throw the ball to you and give you the floor, because we hear about money in politics, and I think most of us think about a broken American system, and we think about, freer and fairer is what we do in New Zealand, but your article doesn't quite sell it that way. Do you want to maybe break down some of the basics before we get into the actual details of the article as to why you've written this and what's it all about?
Yeah, sure. And actually, to your point, I think most of us agree we don't want a system like they've got in America, where you just 100%. Have enormous amounts of money thrown at politics. So Max and I spent actually pretty much most of last year working on a big report about political party funding. And one of the things that we did, look, we collected a lot of data from a number of different sources, but one of the things we did is we approached all the large donors over a specific period of time, so about 100 or so donors, and we asked if they would be happy to talk to us about why they donate. And to be honest with you, we actually did it because we assumed that nobody would want to talk to us, but actually quite a few people did. So we had some really good conversations with people who donate to political parties. Now, bear in mind, these, in order for us to know who's donating, these have to be the large donors. So they're the people who are donating over $30,000. So, these are the people who are donating the big money, really.
The Graham Harts of the world, the billionaires and the hundreds of millionaires of this world.
Yeah, exactly. Because actually, you do have to be reasonably wealthy to be contributing those sorts of sums of money. So we had a talk to, a number of different types of people across the political spectrum, and we asked them, why they donate and what they get out of it. Now, nobody, of course, said to us, we donate because we think we can influence policy. No, nobody's saying that. But certainly quite a number of people said to us they donate because it gives them access, so greater access to people than they would potentially have otherwise. Now, access, of course, is not the same as influence. We're not saying it is, but there is a problem when wealthier people get greater access to the people who are making the decisions than the likes of other people who aren't making big donations and don't have similar sorts of access. Now, I know some politicians will say to you that they will give time to anybody, and I'm sure that is right for some of them. However, what we were made pretty aware of is that for people making larger donations, they expect a larger amount of contact with the people in power.
I'm sure there will be some highly ranked politicians whose number is in the phone numbers of some of these wealthy individuals. There's probably not so many solo mums with those same phone numbers.
That's exactly the point. Yeah. And so then you start asking the question of, okay, you've got the access, even if you're making just small talk conversations, you're in the inner circle, you are much closer to influence than most of us.
I'd like to actually bring up some examples, because the article that you've written, which we'll get to as we're talking through, does specifically speak to some examples of what you were told. Obviously, you haven't identified who they were, but when you were talking to some of these wealthy donors, some of them said things like this. One of them noted that a real problem with people who accumulate a lot of money supporting the systems that have allowed them to accumulate a lot of money. There's another person that said that they did not think that it's right that rich people can distort democracy, although one of the ironies there, of course, is that not saying actively doing it, but potentially on some level that's actually what's happening if they've got access. And finally, not everyone was concerned about the situation, with one donor telling you guys, quote, "The fact that some can promote their position more than others doesn't worry me." So in other words, the fact that we with money can get onto the 9th floor, maybe not literally, but metaphorically speaking, no big deal. No big deal. That's a interesting, entitled opinion to have, I guess.
Well, yeah, exactly. And it is that sort of, it's that sort of view that worries us. And the other thing is, of course, the majority of these large donations go to National and ACT. So they're going to the right. And whilst, you can make an argument that, of course, people are free, of course they are to donate wherever they want. What we're not seeing is we're not seeing a more sort of balanced funding allocation to political parties in order that they can campaign on a more even playing field. Because we actually, in an ideal democratic system, we do want all parties to be able to effectively communicate their policies to the population, so the population's well informed and can make well-informed decisions about where their vote is going to go.
So you've said that the big donations go a lot to ACT and National, to the right. When you're looking at things like what Martin Gillen said, which is that, I'm paraphrasing now, that the preferences of the poor or middle class citizens aren't being represented as well, or aren't being chased as well, or advocated as well by these politicians, what they're advocating for seems to rest with the wealthy donors and what they want, or the sort of positions they would take. So what I'm wondering is, if the majority of the donations go to the right, to quote a word, is this an issue that goes across the political spectrum? So, for example, in Labour, do you still find that the preferences of the poorer or middle-class citizens aren't being pushed or advocated as much by Labour, as opposed to what the wealthy donors may want unofficially as well? Or is this an issue for the right?
Well, it's a particularly topical question, isn't it, given the statement that was made by Labour about capital gains taxes and wealth taxes last week.
100%, yeah.
Yeah. We look, in fairness to Labour, they have done some things that, do, minimum wage increases and so on. And I'm not saying that there is no policy that it is not directed for those who have the least in society. But certainly last week's announcement appears to be directly targeting the most wealthy. If we look at who holds the wealth in New Zealand, it's the very, very top proportion of people. Yes, do I think the Labour Party have, are also trying to attract donations from traditional, perhaps right-leaning parties? Maybe. We don't actually have a lot of donors in New Zealand who contribute across the political spectrum. Most tend to be, either within that sort of ACT or national grouping or the Labour Green grouping. And then there's some other sort of others who float around with New Zealand First and so on. So we don't tend to see a lot of people, hedging their bets, if you like.
Let's have a look also at what the research is saying, or the report is saying recently. A final report delivered to the government in November. Too late to have impact on this 2023 election, but there's been a report done, an interim report from the Independent Electoral Review as to how to make things fairer. Your article obviously touches on this as well. A few things that is suggested in the report: replacing the current broadcasting allocation with a fairer and more effective form of state funding for registered parties, per vote and base funding for registered political parties, tax credits for donations up to $1,000, introducing an expanded electoral access fund, and a new fund to facilitate engaging with Māori communities. I guess I was thinking as well about what's changed ahead of this election. This one here I was thinking about. Changes included lowering the reporting threshold for large donations from $30,000 to $20,000 and new requirements around reporting donations above $1,500. Is this something that wealthy donors are trying to hide as well? Because there is a register of wealthy donors. I've seen it. And if you had to... is it a problem in New Zealand that people are going to, $29,999 so their names don't get made public? Is it going to make that big of a deal? Like I was going to say, Graham Hart gave hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to both National and ACT. We know that it's in the register. Are there going to be a group of people who are going to go, well, now that it's $20,000, I'm going to give $19,900, not $29,900? Is it going to make a difference, that particular idea, do you think?
Yeah, potentially, because for some of those donors, it's only a timing difference. So while that, you're right, the threshold for sort of, we'll call it immediate or reasonably quick disclosure, public disclosure of those donors has reduced from 30,000 to 20,000 for this year. And we should get those details within 10 days of those donations being made. But what will then also happen is with some of those changes that came in from the 1st of January this year, in their annual return, parties also have to report the details of names and addresses of donors where it's over $5,000. But we won't know that until their return, which will probably be April next year. Right. So at some point it will be visible, but it just won't be visible in the short term. One of the things we were told when we were talking to people is that people do like to be sort of invisible with their donations. Some of them, obviously if you're having a big donation, there's no chance that that's going to happen. But for some people, there was a bit of a concern that, perhaps you donate to one party and another party is forming government, whether that might perhaps have some implication to your business or whatever it is that you want to influence. If you have, essentially paid money to the wrong side. So there was a bit of a view of that. But now with that threshold being quite low for eventual disclosure of $5,000, actually it will be interesting to see what happens to that sort of block of money and whether that has reduced quite a bit, because previously we used to see that, again, that chunk of money, but at a higher threshold. So next year will be where the sort of the more interesting information comes out.
We hear the catch cry in America, get money out of politics.
Yeah.
And we hear them saying, looking to places like, I mean, I don't know if literally they look to New Zealand, but like New Zealand and Australia and the UK as to places, as I said earlier, where there's freer and fairer elections as it's seen in America. But the way you're describing it and the way that it's written, it doesn't sound like we've gotten money out of politics. And one last thing from the article, studies from overseas indicate those who raise the most money tend to win. And based on the recent donation research, donors know that too. Wealthy New Zealanders admitted to gaining access to the levers of power through political donations. Those that raise the most money tend to win. So therefore, money in politics is happening in New Zealand, maybe not to the same extent as we hear it in America, but is there a way to do it to actually get money out of politics? Or is it like everybody's right to be able to contribute financially to the political party? Where is that line between making it as free and fair as possible and also, you know, I'm a fan of this golf club, I want to give money to this golf club. I'm a fan of this political party, I want to give money to this political party. How do we marry up those two things?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and absolutely can be done. Canada have done this really well, but there are different ways of doing it. It does involve a bit of state funding, but not a huge amount, it has to be said. So what Canada have done, if we start there, they have a really generous system of tax credits. And how a tax credit works is basically, you know, if I donate $100 to my preferred political party, in Canada, that $100 would attract a 75% tax credit. So I would get $75 back. The party would get $100, and it costs me $25. So there's a very big sort of state contribution. Now, it abates. So the more I donate, the less tax credit I get. And at around about sort of $1,600, that's when I'm no longer getting any sort of tax credit for that. So, and if I had donated, say, $1,600, I'd be getting around about half of that back. Now, that's one way to really encourage people to think about donating to political parties, because a lot of people might want to donate, but could only donate a little bit. And, you know, if it was going to cost you $25, but you knew your party was going to get $100, then, you know, maybe that might be something people would do. Yeah. So there is that. There is other type of state funding, like per vote funding, and that normally has like maybe a lump sum payment from the government alongside it, because you know, sometimes newer parties or smaller parties don't have enough votes to make that meaningful. But lots of countries do that approach as well. If you were to do the tax credit approach, and actually, to be honest with you, even if you did nothing, Max and I both agreed that capping the maximum amount that somebody can donate in any given year is a really good start. So even, you know, if you kept it at $15,000 a year, so the maximum any person can donate is $15,000, you know, that's still a reasonable sum of money. It's not probably enough to suggest that you might get any particular benefit from that, but it sort of has the potential to keep the real big money out of politics, which, you know, certainly Max and I agreed would be a good step.
Right. So really the only way to do that is to make it like these people can give this much to this level, no more during the year. You can't give it 10 donations of that amount. But then if you can only give a maximum of $15,000, then $100,000 can't be given. Interested to think about, like, we hear about bequeaths and that sort of thing, like when people have passed away and they leave a third of their estate to the Greens or something, there might have to be something written in it that would have still allowed that to happen, because who knows when that's going to happen. But either way, the way to get big money out of politics is to basically make it so you can't give big money. That's sort of what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And things like bequeaths, look, you could probably structure that so maybe it could be in a be deleted over time. So 50,000 a year for, 5 or 10 years, whatever it is. Max and I did do some numbers on the tax credit approach in New Zealand, basically taking the Canada model and sort of applying it here. And we calculated that for a cost, it will be a cost to the government, but a cost to the government of $2.35 per voter, you could have the same amount of funding, actually more funding, for the political parties than what they get from donations. Well, we calculated this based on donations as it's sort of 2020, 2021. There was big money coming in last year, so probably wouldn't quite cover that. But $2.35 per voter, you could get rid of the large donors from the New Zealand political system, have a system of tax credits, and really get rid of all the potential issues with influence of, a small number of people in that political environment.
So just for my clarity, if it was $2.35 per voter, does that mean per voter from the last election? So Labor had 1 million votes, National had 800,000 votes, so Labor gets 1 million times 2.35, National gets...
Oh,
so is that what you're saying?
No, I have not explained that very well. So no, what we did is we costed out like a tax credit system and how that might look in New Zealand. So we took basically sort of the amount of external funds that all the various political parties had raised around about the time of the last election, and then we looked. We sort of modelled based on what happens in Canada, the proportion of people that vote, the amount of donations that those people vote, and what a system of tax credits would cost based on all those factors. So it wasn't actually applying that money to political parties as such, but we did, when we did the calculations, we calculated it to make sure that no political party would be worse off than what they currently are. And this is when we sort of crunched all those numbers, and it came out at $2.35. So the reason why we did this is just to show that it's not a particularly expensive exercise to put a bit of state funding into the sort of the political party finance, and then take out the private donations.
How would that state funding then get applied to the parties, or would it just be used, in other words, for a radio advertising, television? You give it to him almost like as a credit, because I think obviously you couldn't do it equally, because a smaller party is not going to get the same as what the National Party would, and if you're going to base it on funding, that still means the bulk of it would go to the right, because it's where the bulk of the private funding goes right now. How would it get applied?
Yeah, so you're right. So the way the tax credit model works is, again, you're capping the maximum donation. So if you don't have a relatively small number of people making huge donations, you do lose that big money coming in. But what it also does is it facilitates a lot more of the smaller donations, and we did find quite. It does seem to work really well in Canada. They've had the system for quite some time, and the parties do get quite a good, there's quite a strong relationship between the number of votes that they get and the amount of funding that they get. So it does seem to actually manage itself. And I think a lot of that is because it does facilitate a lot of small donations, whereas here what we have is a small number of really large donations.
Gotcha. From the University of Victoria in Wellington, that is Professor Lisa Marriott, Professor of Taxation. Lisa, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate you giving us some thoughts. And if people want to check out more about this, go to The Conversation for your article.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Pat.
Here we are, back again. Oh, look, my camera's done that since I was away, Chewy. So why don't you tell us your thoughts while I fix up my camera?
I think there's some really interesting ideas there. I think anything that would encourage lots of smaller donations from individuals has got to be good, or almost like more buy-in for your chosen political party rather than just your vote at the ballot box. I would have concerns, and not that it's not a good idea. I just, as far as making it workable, if you cap an amount that somebody can donate, so say multi-millionaire plastic toy manufacturer man who
Yep.
would love to donate $500,000 to National, but now he can't. He can only only give 16 grand. Well, what if he just gave money to his employees and said, you must donate this?
Yeah, I guess that would be then breaking the law. I guess you can never stop people breaking the law, like the alleged law. I guess that would happen. I thought what you were going to say was that person then gives the money to some right-wing think tank to actually do everything on their behalf.
I hadn't thought about that, but yes.
Well, I had, because I thought maybe
to National.
Well, I thought maybe they could donate the lefty could donate their left-wing money to a left-wing think tank. I know, just thinking, just putting it out there rather than doing it to the party. Although there's also ways around this. One of the things they do in America is the politicians all film stock footage and then they make it freely available on the internet. Looking off into the distance, flag in the background, and then their money groups come along and they take that stock footage and they make adverts for them and then put them on the internet. So they're not officially to do with the political party or person, but the political party or person makes footage available for free on the internet for anyone to use if they want to make them they wouldn't say, if you want to make us an advert, they wouldn't say that because that would be against the rules, but there's also ways around it. I still don't really kind of get the understanding of if there was just $2.35 per citizen or per voter, how that would then work its way out. But I think the simplest way is to go maximum $15,000 donation. Done. The idea of, if you can donate up to $1,600 and you get a bunch of that back in a tax rebate, I don't think that would change anything. Because the people who are donating $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, I don't think they really care about a tax rebate because they've got the money to give away $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. But maybe what it would do is engage more of the smaller operators to get involved. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and I mean. Part of me wants to go, things are going kind of okay. But the more that these massive $500,000 donations come in, the more concerned I get. And as our society gets more unequal, and, we've talked about those 300 families that have all the wealth in New Zealand, if they decide to weaponize that wealth, and suddenly everywhere you turn is a national billboard, and every TV channel is running an ad, every radio station is running an ad because they've got money to burn.
Yeah.
That will put a thumb on the scale. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I agree, but I also think there's got to be a way to figure it out. And I mean, obviously, I've heard someone say socialize it before. I don't know whoever said that to me, but the way to have a free and fair election and get money out of it is to have a free and fair election and get money out of it. And the ultimate way to do that is to be publicly funded. This is not the situation. I don't think you could ever legally stop someone, though, putting their own money into, like, let's say that there's not an official thing, but millionaire X decides to get a whole bunch of his friends together, pay them all to walk down the street wearing T-shirts. I mean, that kind of stuff can never be stopped. So you can never completely get money out of politics, but where's the line?
That's a good idea. T-shirts.
You think we could have T-shirts?
That's something that is completely unregulated.
Yeah, people could do whatever they wanted at any time to wear them to say who they were. Yeah, isn't that funny?
That was so smooth.
I wasn't actually attempting to be smooth when I started talking about political leader X, but yeah, fair enough. Liz just purchased herself a T-shirt. If the left vote, the left wins T-shirt. You've got about 26 hours to get yours in there that are currently on bhnshop.nz. It does feel a bit like a telethon. I'm talking about this so fucking much. We will not talk about this much every single month, but
absolutely
we will. We will. But we're just putting it out there at the moment to help you, remind you. And I actually think also because this T-shirt here, if the left vote, the left wins, I actually think is a really good T-shirt from small to 5XL in three colors with two different labels for the blue ones. I kind of get the feeling, without sounding like a pessimist, it might be the best slogan we ever come up with. And also the one that's most accurate as well. because no matter how tough it looks in the polls, and even Professor Marriott made the point about who does Labor look after. With their announcement last week about CGT and wealth tax, you got to say they're playing that wealth game as well. Even saying all of that, and if you're feeling disillusioned, still, I think the maths work that if the left all vote and the right all vote, the left wins because there's more left than right in our community. Just saying. And you can see on the bottom of the screen, people have been saying, what's the URL again, the domain? It's on the bottom of the screen. It'll stay there for the rest of the night, bhnshop.nz. Yeah, there you go. All right. Shall we get to some of the meat of the night? Shall we? There it is right there. I saw this today on online. No, this is not quite true. Let me tell you the story of my day. This is the story of my day. Remember that song? Blessed Union of Souls, I think it was. I saw the inflation news today, and the inflation news is like, oh, yay, moving in the right direction. So immediately I jumped online because I was like, oh, I wonder what this is like for the rest of the world. I wonder how we're doing compared to the rest of the world. We're not an island. Well, we are, but our economy is not an island unto itself. And it looked around and there were some countries doing better than us and there were some countries doing worse than us. I like to look at our trading partners in particular, our like-minded trading partners. Obviously, China is a trading partner, but they have inflation of 0% at the moment. And, we're right in the middle of the pack. We're not the best and we're not the worst. And I thought, this is good news today. This is not a bad news story. So when I saw this on the internet, and I'll play the whole thing for you before we get into the utter bullshit that's in the middle of this, I kind of went, I've just looked at the numbers. This doesn't sound quite right. So this was released by National today.
Just came out of a meeting to some new data that's out, and wow, New Zealand's inflation rate is at 6%.
So at that point, I was like, I honestly thought, National's going to say, it's great, it's moving in the right direction, we could do better, but isn't that a good result? I honestly thought, especially with the wow, it's at 6%, isn't that great? But you'll be surprised to hear, Chewy, that National actually took a different tack on it.
Oh, New Zealand's inflation rate is at 6%. That's higher than people thought it would be. It's more than 3 times what it should be.
Now, that's a really interesting statement. It's more than 3 times than it should be. Now, it's at 6%. That means what she's saying is it should be under 2%. We'll look at that.
And it means that our prices are rising faster than many.
Notice the word many in there. Doesn't list the countries, what they are,
many countries in the world. The US, their inflation rate's 3%.
Technically 2.97. If we've got to be correct with our numbers, do we pick up on 2.97 versus 3? I mean, you can round it up. I'm okay with that. But if they're going to be finicky about things, technically 2.97.
Canada, 2.8%. Over the ditch in Australia, theirs has come down to 5.6%.
Really? Because I just looked at that and that's not what it said. So I wonder if maybe Australia had an announcement, a couple of hours after ours because of the clock, the sun going around the flat earth. But I thought that doesn't look right to me. So my bullshit meter went off and I started to investigate. Let's get to the end of this though, first of all.
Labor has mismanaged the economy, and the result is the cost of living crisis just drags on now into its 3rd year. National has a plan to reduce the cost of living and get inflation under control.
How?
We'll bring discipline to government spending. We'll ensure you pay less income tax.
Really?
And we'll stop adding the costs and red tape to business that have pumped up prices. You can't trust Labor on the economy, but you can trust National to get inflation under control.
Right. So there's some pretty big claims there. You can trust Labor, you can't trust Labor, you can trust National, yada, 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 yada. So what I've done, Chewy, is I've actually recut this. And if you're following me on Twitter, you may have already seen it. Okay? I am going to show you this video again. And if you've seen this on Twitter, good on you. I've got a few facts and figures in between this, and I've got the evidence to back them up with us to show you how there is, shall we say, some exaggerations, shall we say some massaging, and shall we say some blatant straight out lies that this video has within it. Let's go.
Just came out of a meeting to some new data that's out, and wow, New Zealand's inflation rate is at 6%.
Okay.
That's higher than people thought it would be.
Okay, so here's the first one. That's higher than people thought it would be. Not sure what people Nicola Willis is referring to, but the Financial Review said that Wellington economists expected 5.9%, Well, the Reserve Bank had forecast 6.1%. Inflation is 6%, 0.1% higher than whoever Wellington economists are, and 0.1% lower than the Reserve Bank estimation. So some people said that. Okay, I'm sure some people did. Here is the article that I was talking about, Financial Review. Wellington economists expected 5.9%. So that means, some people said it would be higher. Who were those people? Don't know, not cited. What did they say it would be? Well, I found people saying it would be 5.9, and it ends up being 6%. Is that really as bad as what National needs to paint? All right, let's keep going.
It's more than 3 times what it should be.
All right, it's more than 3 times what it should be. That would put inflation under 2%, like no Western country in the world right now. In fact, Nicola Willis is about to demonstrate that by listing some of our leading trading partners, who they are, and how they're also not under 2%. So here's inflation around the world right now. Yes, and there are some countries under 2%, but it stops about there. And the only countries you could even slightly compare to New Zealand are Spain at 1.9, Greece at 1.8, and maybe Switzerland at 1.7. Now, Switzerland's a bit of an anomaly out on its side. Maybe that Nazi gold is helping them out. But Greece and Spain, we all know about the global financial crisis, what they did to their economy. Don't know if they're comparisons. If you start to compare it to countries who you could compare us to, say, I don't know, for example, where is a country that you could compare us to? Because I'm still going past. I know that 2.8% or 2.9. There you go. There's the US at 2.97%. So they're not under 2%. And really, you got to go quite a long way. There's not really very much else before us when you're talking about like-minded, comparable countries until you get to us at 6%. Notice how we haven't come across Australia. Notice that we didn't come across Australia that she said was at 5.6%, because they're not at 5.6%. They're at 7%. There it is right there. Australia is at 7%. Straight out, bold-faced lie.
And it means that our prices are rising faster than many, many countries in the world.
I'd like to know which countries.
The US, their inflation rate's 3%.
Bit
Canada,
lower.
2.8%.
I'm sure.
Over the ditch in Australia, theirs has come down to 5.6%.
Right. So let's have a look at this. Yeah, it's not true. Australia's inflation is 7%. Just showed you that. Right now, what Nicola Willis is talking about is the Consumer Price Index, which is at 5.6%. National is criticising the top-line inflation in New Zealand by comparing it to the CPI in Australia. It's very deceptive. Now, I don't really understand a lot of that. So what I like to do is research by going to the internet and finding out what it is. Inflation versus Consumer Price Index, CPI, how they are different. The difference between the CPI and inflation is a source of confusion for many. Hi, it's me. At its easiest level, Consumer Price Index in the United States is used to calculate inflation. Thus, their similarities are better understood based on that relationship, even if the details of their differences are not. Looking at definitions, the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the US Department of Labor defined the CPI as a measure of the average change over time in the prices paid by urban consumers for a market basket of consumer goods and services. It defines inflation as the overall general upward price movement on goods and services in an economy. Now, what Nicola Willis is doing is she is giving us the CPI in Australia. That's 5.6% at the moment. She is not giving us inflation. Inflation is 7% in Australia at the moment. All right, we're going to be very clear on that. That is just a straight-out, bold-faced lie, without question.
Labor has mismanaged the economy, and the result is the cost of living crisis just drags on, now into its 3rd year. National has a plan to reduce the cost of living and get inflation under control.
Okay, let's have a look at that. My question, of course, is how? Remember when Christopher Luxon acknowledged on Q&A that National's tax cuts would have caused the same inflationary pressures as their criticisms of how Labor has run the economy? And if you don't remember that, let's have a quick look at that.
Most economists say that tax cuts are inflationary, right? You give people money, people want to spend the money. When they want to spend the money, it drives up demand. Voila, inflation. Why are your tax cuts different?
Well, the point is that Grant Robertson's about to give himself $6 billion, the biggest increase in the budget in the history of New Zealand, right? And all of that's going to be inflationary. That's on top of the $128 billion that we've got. That's $52 billion more than we had in 2017.
Your tax cuts come out of that $6 billion. So you're still spending the $6 billion?
Correct.
So why are yours not inflationary?
Our tax cuts come out of that. They're about $1.7 billion. We think it would be a good idea to do these inflation-adjusted tax thresholds.
So explain to me why it's not inflationary.
Because essentially, it's no more inflationary than Grant Robertson's $6 billion.
So it's the same. It's still inflationary.
Exactly the same. I would argue
ding, ding. So it is the same. It is as inflationary as what they're criticising the then Labor government as what they were doing. Nearly finished, folks. Got to do the breakdown for you, don't we?
We'll bring discipline to government spending. We'll ensure you pay less income tax.
Less income tax. Oh, we had to look at this one then. You mean other than the Greens, whose tax plan gives you the average New Zealander back about $1,100 per year in PAYE compared to National's $800? Who's that party of lower taxes again? And if you're unclear on that, maybe we can show you a couple of fantastic economic orators here talking about that exact thing. We start the video when Chewy has just revealed that National will give you back $800 a year on your income tax.
Total extra income under National, $799.50.
$800. Let's look at the Greens. So $800 for 60 grand.
60,000. Are you studying or looking for work? No.
We're still looking at that same National Labor one. Have you got a?
Oh yeah. Okay. Share this tab as well. There we go. Yeah, children. No, we didn't
We didn't for them, so they know.
Submit. You would say $23 extra per week,
which equals about $1,100 a year. So again, the video talking about, we're going to do this and that, we're going to make taxes better under us. Disciplined spending will ensure you pay less income tax. That is, of course, less than, but not as low as the Greens, but less.
The costs and red tape to business that have pumped up prices. You can't trust Labor on the economy, but you can trust National to get inflation under control.
Well, there you go. So my little tweet said, no, I'm sold, National, no gaps at all in that party political broadcast day. So there you go, Chewy. I think I've laid it out. I think I've showed all the evidence. And now you have an opportunity to turn your mic on and have a crack, if you want to have a crack.
Lies and damned lies. Like, there's not even dressing it up. There's not you can't even say that we're being unfair here. It is just lies. And it's like, oh yeah, we can give you all tax cuts because we're going to somehow make everything more efficient to the tune of billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Because we're not making cuts, we're not borrowing, and we're going to give you tax cuts. It's just insane. Like anyone in your life that believes that this is not going to be inflationary, that they aren't going to go into full austerity mode, borrow out the ass, and just give money to wealthy people.
Yeah, or sell, borrow or sell.
Full of shit. And you turn around and you go, if that is your button issue, if that is why you are voting National, then let me show you this Green Party calculator. Because if that's all you care about, here's the better answer. But yeah, for her to go, like right from the get-go, I've just stepped out of a meeting where I've heard this. Bullshit you have. You've been rehearsing this walk and talk all afternoon. So there you go. You're on the back foot already. The deceptive comparisons, the wishy-washy figures of how they're going to magic it all together, like the utter contempt that they would think that is going to land, and actually the contempt that I have for the people that are going to swallow that hook, line, and sinker. Just, I want people. I want the media to rip this to shreds.
Yeah,
it's not hard.
No,
like turn the thumb screws.
Yeah. No, look,
hopefully that's what we're going to see on Sunday.
I agree. I agree that we need to look, and because here's the thing, this is the thing that frustrates me, and I said this earlier, but let me just spell it out now. This is not all sunbeam and roses, this inflation thing. It's really not. It's better than it could be, and maybe it even should be. But what are they called? Close Up, 7 Sharp, whatever. The Holmes Show tonight actually talked a bit about this, and they talked to an economist, and even the economist said this is not all good news. National could have come out saying this. They could have been critical and accurate, but they choose in this instance to exaggerate and lie, and it really frustrates me. Have a listen.
And Business Desk investment editor Francis Cook is here now. Great to see you again, Francis. How significant is this drop in the inflation rate in the current economic climate?
So this is a really good sign. I think this is something that people can take a bit of heart in, because it has been really tough times for people. We've had the cost of living going up and up and up, and it's been all of these core costs that you really can't avoid. And then in order to try and bring that down, of course, they've been yanking up interest rates. But before that can ever work, you end up getting crunched at both ends. So the fact that we're now seeing it start to work, there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, some of this crunch might start to come off soon.
I was going to ask that. I mean, is the cost of living crisis over? Are we going to start seeing prices for, our groceries and things like that start coming down?
Yeah, so the problem with this is the devil is in the detail. So when we say that inflation has gone down, it means that it's not rising by as much as it was. So it's still going up, just not as badly. And there's also the issue that some parts within that big, wide overall figure, there's some bits that are still going up a lot. I hate to be the bearer of bad news in what should be overall a nice story, but I also don't want to sugarcoat it for people.
So, hello, that doesn't sound like as good news as, like a dumbass like me might say, yeah, inflation's going down. That's an economist explaining it, that this is not all good news. National could have done that, still sold their narrative, still been critical, but instead they chose to lie. Now, I wonder if it's because I always say the 9th floor, because that's apparently where the Prime Minister's office is. Wherever the floor that the National Party leader is and deputy leader, I wonder if it's because the PR people got in and they decided to shape the narrative rather than an economist. Because if this economist had been in that room with them, and if this economist was working for National, they would have said, well, here's the accurate way we can depict that. But they didn't. They just walked down the corridor, down the catwalk, going, exaggeration, mistruth, lie. And because here's the other thing that I always think. That whole Australia is at 5.6% is either a lie, which means this political party is lying to you, or they can't find the correct answer, which means they're incompetent. And they're the party that's telling us they're going to be good with their numbers, and they're the party that's telling us that they're going to look after the economy better. They're either lying about Australia's economy, or they're incompetent so much to a point that they get that mistake and then put it out and then leave it out. Neither one of those two conclusions is okay.
It's the other thing that really irritates me here, right, is the assumption that in the aftermath of the global disruption from COVID, and while there is an active war going on in a big chunk of the food production areas of Europe, that somehow, National are going to get our inflation under 2%. Now, I would drag Nicola Willis onto a show and go, okay, tell us how you're going to do that and by when. Yeah. Like, what factors... Explain to me how tax cuts are going to bring our inflation down under 2%. Go. Because that's what she's saying, right? And she'll go by making the government more efficient. How?
Yeah, well...
We're going to sack a whole lot of people.
Well, when we had this conversation with the Millionaires for Humanity people, as they pointed out, social spending, i.e. benefits, family payments, retirement payments, right? So that area, social spending, health, and education are our three biggest places taxpayer money goes. So what are you cutting from that to get this money that you say you need? Because that's where you'll make your biggest savings. That's where the low-hanging fruit. Are you going to rip the ass out of the benefit system, social spending? Are you going to rip the ass out of education? Or are you going to rip the ass out of health? Because that's really your only opportunity. Yes, you could, like Chewy, if you had a family budget and you were spending like we did $503 last month on power, but everything else is like $20 here and $20 there and $40 there and $50 there. The way that you could save a big chunk of money is to figure out how to get that big bill to a smaller bill, rather than knocking off $2 here and $1 there and $2 there. So the big bills that the New Zealand government has is social spending, health, and education. So that's where your savings need to come from. What are you going to do, National?
Austerity. It's always austerity. If they're talking about efficiency gains, you get more efficiency by having less people working for the health department. You know, it's in all of these things, it's like we've seen over in Europe when they went through their financial crisis, you had a lot of European governments going full austerity mode, and it did not work. We've seen the evidence. They want to talk about evidence-based policy and that sort of thing. There's the evidence. If you're going to say that you are going to save all of this money through efficiency gains, tell me how. What is the mechanism? What is the timeline? Why is it costing so much money? And you'll just point at Labour and go, oh, well, it's because of their pet projects and that sort of thing. And just through the fact that we're national, we're going to be better at it than them. And you're just going to have to take us on faith. And hopefully we'll magic it all together in 3 years. Because what they're talking about here is just nonsense.
When we were talking as well about, you remember we were talking about how can, was it Switzerland? I think it was Switzerland, Norway. These places have such low mortgage rates at the moment. And I got our guest on and they explained to us that, you know, because inflation's really low and there's a comparable thing. So I was just sitting here, and I didn't do this when I organised it, I should have, but I'll do it now. I was just sitting here thinking, why are Greece and Spain's inflation so low? Do you remember, Chewy, what we got told 18 months ago? One of the things that needed to happen in this country about employment for inflation to come down. I won't ask you that question. I'm sorry, I don't mean to set you up the question, but that was more unemployed people. So at the moment, the unemployment rate, the unemployment rate in Greece is 14.8%. The unemployment in Spain is 12.7%. So yeah, they have got lower inflation.
Shit.
And one of them's got 1 in 7 people unemployed. The other one's got 1 in 8 people unemployed. In New Zealand, it's what, about 4% at the moment. So we have higher inflation. So in other words, if we're going to compare it to them, right, then we also got to go apples with apples. We need to knock off another 8% of unemployed people.
Jesus, I think you've cracked it there.
Yeah, of course.
That's the question. Okay, if you're going to have our inflation under 2%, what's our unemployment rate? Because that's the blunt force instrument to drop it.
There you go. Spain unemployment rate is 12.7%. Actually gone up from 12.6%. Greece's unemployment rate 14.8. Oh, that says for 2021. We should try and get an accurate one. There you go. Let's have a look at that. No. It's still 11%. 10-11%.
Ours is 3.4.
Yeah, so there you go. So they're 3 times, their unemployment rate is 3 times as high as ours. Let's have a look at, I'll try and do Spain and see if it can give us an exact one as well. There you go, 13%. That's about 1 in 7. 1 in 7, 1 in 8 people in Spain are unemployed. Are we hearing that? So yeah, the question is, if they can do it, their pressures are taken off because of their unemployment as one of the factors. Therefore, we need to get a massive amount of unemployed people. So under National, here's their new slogan, under National, we will make 8% more people unemployed. And then they'll make a joke saying, that'll all come from the bureaucrats. And then inflation will go down.
It doesn't matter where they come from.
And then the tax take will go down, and more PAYE from those people. And then, of course, they're going to find their money to give back to their rich mates. How does that all work? National?
But again, this comes back to what I've said from National all along. What problem are they trying to solve? The problem that they're trying to solve is that they're not the government. And if they get in and they do this, and say we end up with an unemployment rate of 7-9%, do you know what they have then? A shit ton of beneficiaries to bash all the way into their next election.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm furious now.
Sorry,
look at what you've done to me, Pat.
You're not going to sleep tonight?
Oh, I could see it happen.
And there are always anomalies.
God damn it.
I mean, I'm looking it up as we speak to you, but I understand USA's got a very low unemployment rate. Yeah, they're 3.6. But you have to remember as well, the US, they shut down for a very short amount of time and then they stayed open. As we've been told, the reason we have high inflation at the moment is we basically, quote unquote, printed money to keep small businesses open and to keep people safe from COVID. That's why and this is what we're paying for now. We are paying now through inflation for what we borrowed back during COVID to keep more New Zealanders alive. That's the payoff. So we could be down. We could be down at maybe 3, 4, 5% inflation, and we could have another 20,000 dead New Zealanders. I'm okay with a little bit higher and more alive New Zealanders, alive tax-paying New Zealanders. That'll help put money back into the coffers to help eventually bring it down. The only way that these policies would work today, based on historically what we did, was to have a ton more dead New Zealanders. So I'm okay with where inflation's at right now, if it means we've got more alive New Zealanders, or even if it means we had more alive New Zealanders for a bit longer. Let's say they were people in their 80s who survived another year but have sadly left us now. But I'm okay with that payoff. That's my personal view. You may not be if you're watching this. You'd rather go, more dead people. I want to pay less for my broccoli. Okay, that's fair. That's your point. I'm okay with paying a bit more.
I mean, I saw it was something like 20,000 people out of the American workforce because of COVID-related deaths. So, maybe that's why their unemployment rate's so low.
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, that's a terrifying vision of the future. I don't want it to come true. Make sure everybody votes for a left-leaning party, please.
Because
you have a choice of 3.
If the left votes,
like if you're a normie and you don't like being brave, you can vote Labour. And then if you are a Chad of a human with a bright, glowing vision for the future, then you've got the Party Māori or the Green Party. Just vote. Just vote, you dingus.
Now, speaking of political parties, I sent emails. I've been meaning to do this for a long time, and I haven't. I sent emails off to all the political leaders, just the leaders, and said, do you want to come and meet my audience, our audience? We've had some good months coming up. We're getting approximately 50,000 views on average per month across all of our platforms. Do you want to come and introduce yourself to our audience? You're more than welcome to. Come on board. Come and say good day. And that, when you just, if anyone's watching who's like, you guys are a bunch of dicks, we are getting about 50,000 video views, and that's including the clips across Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, everything. So not just the show, but all of the video content we're making from this show. And so it's not, it's not nothing, and hopefully they will. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if National didn't want to have a bar of us. If they did their research and their homework, they may not. Fair enough. I guess possibly I might do something locally for Dunedin as well, and there's Dunedin National MP. We might be able to get him again. He's been on before. And that's it. Yeah, I think we'll see what happens. I'm sure we'll get some of them, and I've approached them all to say, how about we do Friday nights 9 p.m. live? That's option 1, and then all of you guys can join in as well. Option 2 would be any night Monday to Thursday at 9 o'clock live. So you guys can enjoy it. And the third option would be a pre-record, which I really don't want to do, because I'd love to have you guys involved in conversations with the leaders. Because as we look and hear from the professor tonight, money gets access. I'd love to be able to provide some of you guys access. And the only money you'll have to pay is probably a T-shirt or 2, maybe, Chewy, maybe. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. If you're not wearing a BHN T-shirt, don't even message me. Get out of. Don't ever interrupt me when I'm walking. That sort of thing.
All right, I'm not going to put the shop up again. I've done it enough. You've got 24 hours. You guys know the drill. bhnshop.nz. All right, let's wrap it up for the night, Even though we're into our third half hour, as always, for our hour show. It's still a bit earlier for us tonight.
Been consistent this week, absolutely.
We'll leave it for tomorrow night to continue on other conversations. Follow us on Twitter, both me and Chewy on Twitter. And also remember, here's something you can do if you want to help support us or you want to help get the word out there. Go and subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and or Spotify. If you do all 3 and you've got the option, always go to Apple's podcast, because that helps us in the charts. And you're out in the afternoon and you want to listen back to something we've said, have a listen to us. I don't know what the stats are on Apple Podcasts. You probably have to listen to it for 5 or 10 minutes to get a official listen, but go and have a listen. Go and have a listen to us and help us in the charts, help us get the numbers up. And it's another way you can support us that will cost you nada. Mind you, your time is valuable. It'll cost you your time, but it won't cost you, unless you, of course, just push play on your phone and walk away. It's a bit cheeky, but, possibly. All right, anything else, Chewy, for tonight? Yeah, actually, we've started quite a few comments that we haven't got to. Should we actually be a bit polite and go into some of those comments case people have said some things?
It'll probably be very out of context now.
That's all right.
This is probably more for your attention, Pat. This is the second comment I heard about yesterday's working group. I haven't watched it yet. I'm going to hunt it out tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I messaged Bomber last week, and me and Bomber have had some run-ins over the years, and we kind of kissed and made up a little bit. And so, I'm sure you saw that text. I sent that to you, Chewy.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get Bomber on at some stage. Yeah, I didn't watch it either, to be honest. It was, what's his name? Your criminal mate, friend, right? Damien Grant.
Grant, the frauder man.
He was hosting it, and
okay.
I watched about 5 minutes of it whilst I was prepping it. I just went, "This is terrible," and I couldn't handle it. Look, no offense to the man himself, but I just can't. I can't listen to him. I just can't.
I'm happy to go with full offense to the man.
I'm more saying part of the reason I can't listen to him is the way he speaks. I don't want to hassle him for that. Like his actual voice, which obviously is damaged from something, but it's a very hard listen. The content wise, fine, piece of shit. But it was a hard listen, and I didn't listen to it. And then I went and had a look at at the stories they were talking about, because we often obviously feature them here, and there wasn't really anything I was going to focus on. I don't think. I might have another look, but yeah, it was a hard watch. Sorry, that was a very long 2-minute long one tweet there, one text message there.
Gary here has a great idea. Some cracking photo op plans for my BHN hoodie.
Good.
There will be a need to curate a BHN hoodie in the wild gallery. Absolutely.
Definitely.
I'm just saying there's going to be political billboards out and about. You can link those two things in your mind if you like.
Maybe we should sell some.
I'm not the police. I'm not telling you what to do.
Maybe we should sell stencils. I mean, we could never tell anyone legally to deface public property. That would be wrong. And I would never encourage that.
Bad.
That would be wrong and bad. But there are some political, billboards going up, and if someone did something to something, we could never ever endorse that and never tell people to do anything. But I do like it when there's like some extra red put on those billboards. Like, I think red's a good color for those billboards, but we could never say anything, and we never would endorse anyone. In fact, I should be clear. You know what I'm like, Chewy, with my legalities. I would absolutely say that no one should ever deface a hoarding or a billboard. I would not encourage it. In fact, I would say don't do it. It's wrong to do that, Chewy.
You've certainly dropped a few things that people could pick up for you, maybe.
No. Don't you do that. I'm not dropping anything. I'm literally saying do not at any stage touch any hoardings or billboards. There's no hidden message there. Don't do it.
V Bunch says 7 Sharp was pretty good on their story versus inflation. One News was so negative.
Effing. Yeah, fair enough.
And yeah, I think this is what we're disappearing into with a lot of political commentary. They're going hyperbolic about all of these things, and we're getting really punchy headlines, but almost no analysis out of anyone. And I worry about that for people that aren't like us and our listeners and that sort of thing, that really are political obsessives and will dive into these numbers. I'm talking about someone who just puts the news on while they're having their dinner, that they're just going to get these punchy headlines and they're going to base their vote off that. It's, we've got a massive hole in our political analysis.
I thought you were talking about David Seymour. We've got a massive hole. No.
I'll allow it.
Just speaking of, look, I want to reiterate as well, because I agree with the rest, JK. Please don't deface billboards. They don't change anyone's vote, and it makes those who do it look bad. I agree. I'm 100% on board with you. Not joking around, no joking to be whatsoever at all.
What about moustaches and glasses and eye patches?
Do you know one of the things about defacing billboards that's kind of hilarious? Not that you should do it. Is that
unrelated, yes.
Unrelated, but I think it's kind of cool. someone defaced one of Jacinda's billboards, and it became her Facebook profile pitch for the next kind of 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
It's pretty funny. It's like taking it on the chin and
that.
going, "This is pretty hilarious."
Maybe a slogan idea. Is that true, or did you hear it from National?
It's very good. Very good.
Simon says, I do find it funny, still National comparing figures to Labour Party figures that haven't been released yet. Yep, absolutely. Mr. Anderson says, I'm not even going to pronounce that name. Watch this guy if you want to understand austerity. Yanis Varoufakis. Varoufakis.
We'll go
and it's a Greek name, and the Greeks know about austerity because they had to wear it for so long.
Yeah.
Mr. Rob Burney, they create a problem that they know will aggravate it, blame it on Labour, then use it as a weapon in the next election, just as I guess I said. And I mean, look, let's be a little bit fair as well. I mentioned it last night. There has to be a yardstick where you can stop blaming the previous government. And I wonder where that yardstick is.
Well, it does
because I think it varies from issue to issue. Right?
Well, no, it does not just issue to issue. Like, so for example, it's fair to say that when National brought in national standards in 2009, that's impacting 15-year-olds today in the classroom, the same 15-year-olds that they're complaining about not performing. So it wouldn't be fair to say in 2014, right, we did this in 2009, it's not our problem anymore because it's impacting kids today, those national standards. So I don't know if there's necessarily a cut-off date, like as in 3 years later it's cut off, but I think there is a point with each policy that you could go through. Like if you put in place a 30-year policy, you can't just disown it after 3 years. So I agree with the concept, but I don't think it's a carte blanche cut-off line for the new politics, for all policies.
Because I think what I was talking about there is obviously there's a very clear link between the state of our roads and the fact that National increased the weight of transport trucks and slashed their road maintenance budget. You can't just turn the taps off or turn them back on and expect that everything's going to be fine. And yes, I think that's all the comments that we had started there.
I'm just bringing my dog to my workplace.
Are we doing the dogs again?
Well, I just
Ilva.
Because I can. Because I'm not Tory. Oh, it's your baby.
Ilva. I'm going to have to grab you, am I?
Should we go? I think we're going. Maybe we should do 2 T-shirts, and on one of them we should put Ilva, and on the other one we should put Nala.
Look at the puppy. Look at the puppy.
That would be a good T-shirt. We know someone. We know an artist quite close to you that could do some cartoon versions of these 2 dogs. I wonder, because I know, like, if we ever did a Team Chewy, Team Pat hat, Team Chewy's going to win. Wait, come back inside. Get on your mat. But maybe if we did 2 dogs, maybe Nala might have a chance against Ilva. Nothing to say. Nothing about Ilva. Nothing at all. I'm just saying. Could do. I want to go. We're starting to ramble, and I've got things to do and people to be. Hang on. Anyway. We'll be back tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News, our Big Hairy Cult. And we will catch you then. Be safe. Remember tomorrow night, see you at 9, bring a friend. And fingers crossed for all our political leaders. I expect to be seeing some emails from tomorrow, and I'll give you an update tomorrow night. All right, team. bhnshop.nz, 25-ish hours for you to get your orders in. And then next week we start to printed
countdown.
And it sent out to you. Fantastic. All right, team. All the best. Catch you tomorrow night. Hooroo.